first sort of area I'd like to touch on is basically around instilling a growth culture in your team. And, you know, sort of when do you do that and how do you do that? I mean, particularly for you, I think LogMeIn would have been an early example where you had to do that. So can you sort of take us through that process?
Sure. So for a growth culture, earlier is better.
Yep.
Culture is really hard to change later. So I was telling an example earlier in the workshop we were working on that at Dropbox, I think, is the best example of a growth culture where it was only 8 people. Like at LogMeIn, I never really thought about trying to create a growth culture across the whole company. I thought I need to be able to grow this business despite the other people rather than trying to kind of work with the other people. And so, but my stated objective when I went into Dropbox was we're going to create a growth culture. And I had 6 months to do it. It was an interim role, 6 months to do it. And I think the most important thing that I did for creating a growth culture there was sharing the experiments that we were running and the results of those experiments. And when people saw wins get pretty addictive. And then I think the best proof point of the growth culture being there was that when I left, it took them another 9 months to have a head of growth or marketing replace me. And basically it was that initial core set of engineers and driven by the CEO, they continued to experiment, potentially even increase their experimentation, and it was the kind of most growth culture company that I'd seen, and that was without a kind of head of marketing for a long time. So
yeah, it's kind of cool. So I mean, one of the things that you mentioned earlier was sort of who your sort of head of growth should be, but I mean, obviously, the earlier the better, but when is the right time? Because I think a lot of the audience were generally from smaller companies. I mean, when is the right time to actually find that person?
When you have product market fit. So I think that while you're trying to initially, you have to make something that's growable before you focus on growing it. And if nobody wants the product you've created, it's impossible to sustainably grow that product. And then even if people want the product you've created and love it after they've tried it, if they come to your homepage and it's really confusing what the heck you do, and then they try to get started and it's broken or so confusing that they give up along the way, then that's still not very growable. It's more growable than if nobody wants the product. But so that's basically, I generally advocate that at least validate that people who try the product, you have enough of them that say, I love this, I can't live without this product. So I ask them the question, how would you feel if you couldn't use this product? And I'm looking for people to say, I would be very disappointed without the product. And when I get enough people saying that I'd be very disappointed, I know it's growable. Most of what I did back in the days when I was doing the interim marketing and growth roles was I would focus on getting that first user experience right. I mean, in a sense, I kind of cheated at growth because that's the cheapest, easiest way to make a company grow a lot faster, really fast. Like getting there really fast is to actually make it so that you ask the people who love the product, why do they love it? You set the right expectations on the messaging, and then you deliver the experience that makes them love it as quickly as possible. You're going to get more gains more quickly out of that than anything else you'll ever do in the future of growing that business. And I got to be the guy who would go in and do that. So helped them to think I was pretty good at it. But I just came into the best opportunity for improvement.
I'm sure there was more to it than just opportunity. But
well, but think the other way. If I had done all of that stuff on a product that nobody wanted, guarantee I would have failed every time. So the best thing that I did was actually make sure that people wanted the product first. And
yeah, you sort of touched on something interesting there. So you're saying that the best thing you can do is go and find those really hardcore users and sort of cater most to them. But doesn't that kind of run a risk of sort of alienating perhaps some of the more marginal users? And how do you sort of deal with that? Obviously, it did work for you. Yeah,
no, I mean, I think that there's a temptation of. I actually wrote a blog post about this a while ago where I talked about, I think it's called Chasing Problems, and that founders, basically to create a product that people really want, you you have to identify a problem that people have that they don't have a good solution to, and then you got to go out and build that solution. And so sort of the root of every successful company is identifying a problem and solving that problem, but it's marketers then who say, oh, I'm not going to focus on the people who love the product. I'm going to focus on all these people who would love the product if we only did this. And so what you do is you say, oh, okay, I'm going to make some changes based on what they're asking for. Now you broke it for the people who actually love the product. Then you move to these guys. And so, and you keep just kind of bouncing from one group to the other versus find the people who love the product. And hopefully the people who love the product map to a big market. And if they do, then you're fine. But if they don't, then you have some strategic conversations to have. Like, are we going to go for passionate customers or are we going to go for lots of customers? And that's a hard place to be. But assuming that you identify something that people like really love this benefit about the product, then what you're doing is you're reorienting the entire business around that core value, because that's the hardest thing. Most businesses fail because they never reach product market fit. So once you identify product market fit, you need to calibrate everything around that product market fit. First, user experience, long-term product roadmap to enhance the things that are great about the product, messaging to drive people in, more of the right types of customers who need the product. And the truth is the people who say they would be somewhat disappointed without the product or not disappointed, just got to forget about them. Just let them go.
Cool. Well, yeah. So that scares
Push
me.
back if you don't like it. But
No, it just terrifies me a little bit because, I mean, obviously, I've been more on the acquisition side personally, and so I think I have fallen into the trap sometimes of just bringing in the widest group that I can, in the hopes that we'll get somewhere. But I think what you're saying does make sense. Just to sort of go a little further then. So once you've kind of defined the market that you're after, what's your general process for actually attacking it and trying to, because I mean, there's one part of growth which is obviously identifying the right part, but then,
Yeah, so the first thing is, again, like sort of stripping out all friction, and that's where you get most of the gain is just in kind of fixing the broken parts. And then, and an example that I talked about in the workshop today is that I didn't always think that. First thing that I did at LogMeIn was, like, we built this product, I'm going to go grow the shit out of this product. And what happened was that we got to the point where I could spend $10,000 a month. We had our team, we were hammering away at that, and we couldn't scale our budget beyond that. But when we looked at the data, 90% of the people who signed up for the product never tried the product. So do I push harder on trying to acquire more people, or do I fix what happens to the other to the 90% who sign up and never try the product? Do I try to fix it for those people? And that's what we did. So that required a full team effort of trying new installers, getting the messaging right, figuring out every step along the funnel that was causing people to drop out. And once we fixed all of that friction in the funnel, then we went back to the same channel. So no new creativity on finding new channels. Nobody came up with the killer channel we hadn't tried before. We tried the exact same channels that scaled to 10,000. Now they scaled to over 1 million. So it's this holistic approach of, I got to think all the way through the funnel, and the starting point is the finish line at the bottom of the funnel needs to actually be a worthy finish line. Assuming that is, then I got to think through the path to get there, set the right expectations in the marketing message, and then ultimately go out and try to build the channels to get people. And then in terms of identifying the channels, it starts with the who. Who are the people who can't live without the product? Why can't they live without the product? What's the best context to reach them? Are there lots of people that are seeking that? So I generally think that active seekers are the easier people to reach, because you don't have to convince them they need it. They know they're looking for something and just need to direct them to it. Very few products have a lot of active seekers where there's not a good incumbent product in the market. So then you have to move to demand creation, and that's a lot harder, and it's where content marketing and other kinds of things where you sort of help to create the demand and help first inform people they have a problem and then solve it for them.
Yeah, exactly. So I guess now that we're kind of touching on acquisition, what are the channels that just absolutely do not work anymore? Or are there none? I mean, does it depend wholly on the business.
MySpace really doesn't deliver much anymore.
That's fair.
But I mean, even like, okay, there's billions of people in I think billion plus in Facebook now, but Facebook as a free acquisition channel doesn't work in a meaningful way compared to what it used to be. I mean, you used to be able to do things virally. Entire businesses were built off of like viral content on there, like Upworthy, where today most of it is through creating that same viral content, but now boosting that content and having to actually kind of test and then put some money behind it, and then just being smarter about how you do that money. So retargeting lists and other kinds of things, or even pulling data in from different pieces. But as far as channels that don't work, that used to work, I can say that Twitter used to work really well for us, for GrowthHackers, and I think we get half the people from Twitter that we got a year ago.
Yeah, we've also actually struggled with Twitter, funnily enough.
Yeah, well, I think what happened was because it's not algorithm driven, it's like literally whoever's pushing the most content, that everybody got greedy and just pushed so much content before too long it just like it's all it is junky content.
Yeah, exactly.
So the only way to do better is to push more junky content.
Yeah, and then no one wants to visit Twitter. So I guess, we've touched on some of the things that don't really work. What would you say are the places that people should be looking for in 2017?
Well, it's really, it's so dependent on the business itself. Mm-hmm. But I think it's, I think the best opportunities for growth are when you can have kind of a monopoly to a channel that is your own users. Like if there's something that you can build into your own experience that drives more people needing your product, then you don't have to worry about other people saturating that channel.
Yeah, the CPCs stay low, or if it's a free channel, then yeah, you've got the whole thing. So I guess sort of putting that a different way, I mean, who would you say out of the companies out there are actually doing a really good job sort of right now, and what channels are they doing it on?
So I mean, I would say Facebook is a prime example. What channel does Facebook use? Facebook uses Facebook. They play that balance between, okay, if I could jam 2 more ads on the page, or I could push more people's content that drives more engagement on the platform, that drives more usage, that drives more ad opportunities. So basically finding ways to drive more engagement, more sharing, more just across kind of all of the R metrics, but whether you're driving more referral, retention. So I think for new businesses, maybe you don't have that opportunity as much, and then I think a lot of it's moving toward paid now, toward paid and just layering in lots of data to make your paid work better.
Right, so as in just finally targeting the demographics and going for retargeting lists and so on. Mm-hmm. One of the things that's kind of scared me, this is the last question on acquisition. This is where I worked for a long time. So. Okay. Anyway, one of the things that has really kind of scared me is, Google is obviously one of the biggest players there, both in terms of the free through SEO and the paid through AdWords. What's really scared me is that you can never really tell what would have come anyway. Do you have any kind of ways of addressing that, or do you just not care if it's a spend $1, get $1 back?
So I mean, it's interesting that Google has gotten more and more blocked the information around the stuff that would have come anyway. So you no longer know which word they searched when they come there. I mean, it used to be like 100% of the words that they search before they get there. Now it's like you're lucky if you get like 3%.
Yeah, exactly.
You can maybe project off of that. So, I mean, it's not surprising that they're moving you toward the paid stuff, but I think at the end of the day, what you have to do is triangulate on things a little bit more now, where you know that Google still, the majority of the intent that Google is distributing around the internet is still all free. And you have to basically think like, okay, I can there's a finite amount of intent for my product category that's out there, and I want to capture as much of that intent as possible. And so I should, even if, I mean, the nice thing is, even if you don't know exactly how well it's working, the marginal cost for good SEO is so low that you don't need exact ROI measurements to know that it's a really good ROI.
Yeah, that's true. So out of curiosity, who would you say is the current best player at SEO?
I would say the best player that I know is a guy, Luke Levesque, who recently left TripAdvisor, and I don't know if he's announced where he's moving to yet, but he's moving to another team.
Curious to know that one. Yeah, because he's obviously very strong. Cool. So just to kind of move on to, I'm just kind of conscious that we don't want to spend too much on my favorite topic, but yeah. So moving on to another one which I've recently been attacking at freelancers. So retention is obviously, a really important part for keeping, for really having sustained growth. What sort of after 6 months, how many users would you expect to see still around, if you're on a relatively stable trajectory?
Yeah, I think it's totally dependent on the business, I think I literally talked to a business this past week who has been around for, I think he said they've been around for 10 years, and they have 100% customer retention in 10 years.
Do they have one customer?
They don't have very many customers, and it's in the sub 50, but they have 100% customer retention. So, I think it's a matter of it's really, I would look less about where you're supposed to be and more about where your retention is and how easy is it to make it better. And if you say, you set yourself a 30-day period to move your retention from this to this, and you don't move it at all, and you do a lot of experimentation and a lot of research to see what would cause people to come back, and then probably you're maybe more optimal than you thought you were. But if it takes you a week to get what you thought was going to take 30 days, then you should probably mine that vein of gold for as long as it keeps delivering. And so I think that's a little bit of the iterative nature of this stuff. If it's really hard to get an improvement, but you put enough effort into it, I did an experiment, it didn't work, so let's move on. But you got if you do the 10 best experiments you can think of to try to move a metric and none of them work, then that's how you learn that in your business you're probably doing pretty well.
Yeah. So one of the questions that's come up for us around retention, there's kind of a debate about whether you should be trying to kind of focus on improving the positive experiences that users have and try to focus on those, or whether you should go in and try to sort out the negative ones that they might have. Do you have a sense of which way is better, or is this just again down to the business?
I definitely think that there's negative experience. So I think one of the really interesting things about retention is that it's, I think, more than a function of the ongoing product experience. The experiments and improvement that you can do to onboarding is generally the best lever that you can do to improve customer retention long term. That if you don't give them a really good experience with the product initially, they may never get to the point where they're completely sold, and they're always kind of a loosely plugged in customer. But if you can figure out what makes a great customer and really invest in getting them to that experience fast, then you're going to find probably improvements to your long-term retention better that way than focusing on how do I get my semi-retained customers that have been around for a long time and make them even more retained. But I mean, one of the things that on our team that we did, and I again talked about this in our workshop earlier, so it'd be redundant for a few people, but I started seeing a bunch of great ideas coming from my team, like for GrowthHackers having browser notifications, which we launched in the last week, that let them know that new content in a category that they're following has been that has now just started trending, and letting them know about it. And but like I started seeing a bunch of those ideas. And then in the group that's focusing on improving the retention metric, I said, let's take a step back and actually let's write our hypothesis on why the heck people would come back. Like, let's first rationalize why people would come back rather than just start to do a whole bunch of tactical experiments to try to improve it. Let's actually try to think from the user's perspective, why would they want to come back? And once we've gone through that, I think that the experiment ideas that have started to come out since then are more really kind of getting to the heart of the problem, as opposed to just like little tactical things you can do to get slight boosts.
Yeah, so that definitely seems like you focus more on finding the things that the users would do that would get them to stick, rather than fixing up any sort of negative areas.
But I do think, like, finding out that that there's one thing that annoys the crap out of people who otherwise would love your product, but no one's ever there to answer the phones when they call for support, or that the product crashes every time that they log into it, but when it doesn't crash, they like it. Like, there's definitely some things that are annoyances that could help to improve retention. So I think you got to work both ends.
Yeah, that makes sense. So just to continue with the R funnel, so we're actually trying to look into building a referral program that works for us right now. You mentioned earlier that basically the incentivized referral programs, it helped a lot, I think, at Dropbox, obviously, but not so much in other cases, and you didn't see it as a way of...
Well, we didn't try it at LogMeIn because I was afraid to.
Yeah, right.
I was afraid that we would break really good referral numbers that we had there, but in Dropbox we said, what the hell, let's try it anyway, and it worked really well.
Extremely. I mean, it's like a case study, basically.
Yeah,
I mean, we definitely referred to that quite a lot in our design. So, I mean, I guess... really, we're looking at the incentivized one, but I actually feel like we don't have a great sense of our word of mouth, and I think a lot of businesses find it hard to measure that. Can you sort of speak to how you sort of solve that problem?
Yeah, so I mean, the first thing, like, surveys are kind of the best way to do that. So you can,
I guess you're a bit of an expert there too.
Yeah, you can survey from two different directions. You can survey from your existing user base and ask them, have you referred it to anyone? Mm-hmm. If so, how did you describe it? There's so much like great data you can get out of that. And then the other direction is, how did you find out about it? From a friend, from a colleague, from Google, from this. So you kind of like see it from both the people who are signing up and the people who are referring. And then you want to dig into, why are they referring it? Like, if it's, I think in your case in particular, is what's the bigger motivation? Is it to refer freelancer, or is it to refer a specific provider that they found through the freelancer? And tapping into the right motivation is probably going to be more powerful than kind of a bunch of other things. So when somebody actually does refer someone, was it, because then it's okay if it's the provider and not freelancer, because then you could actually say, you could find a way to kind of weave your message in there. I found these guys, they're awesome, and I found them through Freelancer. You should check these guys out. And then there's a link through Freelancer. So from the provider's perspective, it looks like they don't even have to know that it came through this referral program. It still just looks like a freelancer referral. But without going into too much specifics on your business, because you might not. But I mean, like, to me, I think understanding existing motivations, to me, is more important than trying to trigger new motivations that don't exist yet. So, like, really digging into, when the desired behavior is already happening, why is it happening? How can I get more of it?
Yeah, so I think that rather than just sort of giving someone $10 that they may not really have a use
right.
for.
Like, I don't think Dropbox's referral program would be the case study that it is if Dropbox didn't already have awesome referral before we introduced the referral program. People already wanted to talk about it. We just found a way to kind of layer a referral program in, where even when they were not in the referral program, but just through normal folder sharing and other things, when they would get notifications that says, hey, you just got 250 more megabytes of free space because this person signed up who you shared a folder with, shit, maybe I should share a folder with more people. Like they didn't necessarily like have to think that ahead of time, but it became a good like new prompt to get them to participate.
Yeah, it probably also helps with just keeping them engaged, right?
For sure.
Yeah. Is it worth I mean, referral programs to me, they do seem like something that you would do as a larger business. Is it worth going for it if you're smaller? I mean,
well, there was 8 people or 9 people at Dropbox when we introduced the referral program, so I don't know what you mean by large business versus small business.
Oh, I mean, so I mean, Dropbox, I would say always kind of had, global ambitions. I think, right? I mean, it was always geared to become really huge. I can certainly imagine that for e-commerce stuff, like a lot of the sites in Australia are not massive. Is it worth sort of pursuing that? Is it just too something that you should just look at and say this is too hard? We won't test it. We'll test other things.
So it comes down to the best way to boost referral is not by incentivizing referral. It's by understanding the experience that leads to people referring the business and making sure that you fine-tune the delivery of that experience. You get enough people to the right experience in the product, you're going to unlock more referrals. And so like that would be the starting point, is don't always think of referral as something that you're manipulating. Think of referral that's it's just indicator of doing something else really right. And then where you can kind of accelerate it from there. That's where I was saying like the best channels are channels where you have a monopoly on access to that channel. And so I would say that referral is something every company that has any customers that are passionate about the product is something they should be testing the crap out of. Like it may not work for everybody, but you want to find out if it works, because it's the other kind of really cool thing about it is that if it works, you don't have to go viral, but like if you can kind of double your referral rate, then it means that you can pay twice as much in paid channels to get someone in your funnel in the first place.
Yeah, exactly. So just to stick on the sort of smaller business theme, I mean, testing has been a big part of what you spoke about earlier today, and definitely that's how we attack growth at Freelance and everything. If you are a small business, how does that work? Because I would feel like it would detract from maybe some of your operational stuff. Like it feels like it would be a lot of work to get it sort of happening alongside just the normal course of business.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you're a smaller business, you want to work toward an optimal experience. So one way or the other, whether you're a big business or a small business, and in a really big business with lots of volume coming through, you can do pretty rapid A/B testing to get to that optimal experience. In a smaller business, you probably have to spend a lot more time on research into understanding where the experience is broken. So really good usability testing, really kind of bold changes so that you're not just doing like a little tweak that's going to require 3 years of traffic to see if it worked or not, but like do something that's really big that hopefully you can start to see after a couple of weeks if it made a difference or not. And so I just think you just need to be kind of more deliberate about those types of experiences. But whether you're big or small, the external customer acquisition tests is where you can run lots of tests. There's no you can run lots of tests. There's no cap on how many tests you can run externally. I guess there's a budget cap, but not a traffic cap.
Yeah, absolutely. So actually, one of the issues that we have at Freelancers, so this is for the slightly larger businesses, all of our pages are constantly being A/B tested all the time. And this kind of creates, it means that we learn a lot and we're able to sort of move quickly, but it does create a kind of disjointed experience for the users because they're almost always seeing something different. I mean, have you ever found that that's, the active testing has actually hurt?
I think if you're testing without like kind of a clear purpose, without sort of like the test itself is a step backwards, but if you learn something, let's say you test for 1 week between A and B, and you find out that B is a little bit better than A, and now you stop running A and you're running just B, then like going forward, it means that every single person forever going forward has a slightly better experience than they would have. So I think the short-term disjointed experience is probably more than made up for by the improvement, but there's ways to work around it. Like if you cookie them based on the experience, it's only a disjointed experience if they're experiencing both.
For sure, yeah.
Yeah, if they're experiencing, like if it's in onboarding, there's only one time they go through onboarding anyway, unless they like go to a new browser and forgot their login and have to go through it again.
Yeah.
But, so I think it's okay if it's a little bit disjointed as long as you're learning in a way that improves the experience for more people downstream. Like that's part of the sacrifice you make, that you have to have it slightly bad in the short term for the people who are on that version. And then as you get a bigger amount of traffic, then you could always say, I'm going to put 80% on the proven way, and I'm only going to put 20% on the new test way. Or maybe if you're Amazon, maybe you're only putting 1% on the...
Yeah, I think I've heard Google's sort of less than they're only testing with 2% of their traffic, and all of their tests are in that 2% or something like that. I mean, it's crazy. Cool. I actually said I wasn't going to ask more acquisition questions, but I did have a couple more here that I wanted to
I'll ask you if I don't know the answer.
There's obviously the main channels like Facebook, AdWords. I think probably everyone in this audience who has had anything to do with marketing has had to touch these channels. Is there anything outside of that you should attack, just everyone should have a look at?
It really depends on the product category. So like if you're targeting teen girls, then Facebook is actually not a very good channel to target them. You're going to probably do a lot better with Instagram. And then depending on a different audience, like Pinterest is going to be great for you. So it's really like, where are the people? And even more importantly, where are your people? So I mean, but what's great is that you can figure that out so quickly just by asking them. Just like where do you spend time? Like it's pretty quickly you can say, and then you just have to realize that there's, even though that there's limitations with Instagram, like you can't build in a tracking link on a post on Instagram. People have found ways around being able to
like quote this code to get a 5% discount.
Yeah, or like on the profile you can put a link and like point them to the profile to go through that tracking link and just change it every time you're running a new test. And so I think it starts with, where are my people, and they break down every channel where your people are, and then I can already predict your next question, but what about the people I'm not reaching? Where are they? So, but I think the bigger issue is, I'm starting to see the pattern. But the bigger thing is that that the channels are changing so quickly, and that people are fickle, and they're like migratory into the next thing, that it's probably easier to just track where your people are going than where your the profile of your people that you haven't reached might be, and then once you identify the channel, just knowing that if there's not a playbook for getting people from that channel, that's probably a really good channel to be focused on, because it means that if you're the first to figure it out, like you'll get a lot of those people. If it's a well-documented playbook from that channel, then there's a good chance you're going to only get kind of incremental gain from it. So. Like the first to figure out Pinterest, and it's not to say that you have to start from scratch. It just means that there's less developed information around it. So if you do a deep dive and talk to as many people, you're like, I got all these people on Pinterest, and there's a lot of people that swear by Pinterest as a channel. I don't know how to work Pinterest, but I don't have my audience isn't really on there. So how does it help me to learn Pinterest?
Cool. So just I guess the last part of the R funnel, which we haven't covered in this chat so much, was activation. I kind of avoided it because you sort of
I don't think we covered revenue either.
Well, sorry, kidding. You're right about that. Yeah. We'll stick to activation for the moment. I was avoiding it because you kind of talked a lot about it earlier, so I wanted to make sure we got this other stuff in. So
Get all
around
these streaming guests though, so we can.
Oh, of course, yes, of course. Always streamers. So for activation, I mean, you've mentioned onboarding programs. How hard should you try on those? Because I mean, ours are generally a very heavy cadence of emails, but you know, should you just stop quickly? I know that with GrowthHackers, you guys unsubscribe people after a week or something.
Yeah, I mean, to me, activation is a lot less about the emails, and activation is a lot more about, you know, that initial visit.
Mm-hmm.
How do I get that initial visitor interested in my product, motivated to sign up for it, if it's that kind of a product or whatever it is? How do I actually get them from sort of interest to experience, and an experience that actually makes them want to come back again? And so it's less about the email, it's more about the experience. And so a lot of it is sort of qualitative research and kind of figuring out what the experience I should be delivering is. And then there's really kind of two ways to get them there. So one is what's the friction that stands in the way of the experience? So certain products have been really good about, like, all right, I'm not going to make you register to experience this. Experience it, like Pandora. You guys, I don't think have it here, but music service, like Pandora doesn't say go and register for Pandora so you can listen to music. It just, you go there and it says enter the name of an artist that you like or a song that you like. Well, I don't know why, but okay. Hey, that sounds good, because they start playing related music. And then try another one. You go and try another one. It says, oh, wait, before you go, save the previous station. I saved the previous, that requires you want to register to save that previous station. So now you're registering based on experience that you had, rather than putting a registration wall in front of the experience. And
yeah, I can only imagine that must have boosted signups a ridiculous amount. I mean,
yeah, and I think any business could do that. I mean, that's what we did even in my first company, Uproar.com, a game company. We flipped it so that instead of having advertisements that led to our website, they hit a form that then they could play a game. We said, let's move the game to the websites, where instead of running the ads, let's actually build a syndication network of the game across thousands of websites. The gameplay experience starts on those websites. It just starts asking trivia questions. They answer the trivia questions because they can't help it. It's so easy. And then, like, even if you just guessed, you would get a qualifying score. And it says, congratulations, you qualify for this week's cash drawing. Enter now. And then we had an engagement path where it was like, now you're already registered, join a live game. Next cash prize is coming up soon. 2,000 people playing in bingo right now. And so we could lead them in. So, but basically, we pushed the experience not only on our website, but all the way out to the advertising channel.
yeah, that's actually really cool. And that actually does lead in nicely to my next question, which is, I think in a lot of areas of advertising, so for instance, content marketing or native advertising, I mean, you actually have this, you have to kind of present the user with a whole bunch of content up front and try to get them activated off that. I mean, do you have any, I guess, more general sort of tips for dealing with that problem? Because you want to have that activation first go, but you're kind of also putting this.
Yeah, I mean, I don't necessarily think of content marketing so much as the activation. It works especially well in B2B, and that ultimately you're trying to get them kind of qualified for your product, and so you're trying to get them marketing qualified, sales qualified, but even before that, like just consideration qualified. And so a lot of times you have to kind of be a bit of a thought leader, where you're essentially saying, if say you're kind of selling a product to get people to move more. If you sit 8 hours without standing up, your heart, you double your chance of a heart attack, and start kind of advocating that, and like, oh man, I got a problem. I don't stand up enough. And then like once you've kind of got them along there, okay, maybe they're now at a right point where I can start to kind of serve them advertisements or drip campaigns that get them to consider my move around product or whatever it is. But it's sort of like kind of depending, where if there's already lots of people that are searching for a way to remind me to move around, then maybe you could skip the content marketing. But it's not really B2B type example. But ultimately, like most of the time, consumer products are pretty impulsive. You know, a consumer just can make a quick decision, but business products are rarely impulsive. Business products, you kind of have to be pretty considered and do I really need this? Do I not need this? And kind of work your way down. So like with GrowthHackers projects, I'm not just pushing projects. I'm basically trying to help educate people how they should be approaching growth in general. Once they start approaching growth in the right way, they need a system for managing it. But I can build a lot bigger pool to where, you know, when we were still in private beta, I was able to build 9,000 companies on the waiting list for it just through the content that got people to where they started asking, is there a tool to do these things more effectively?
Yeah, that's actually kind of interesting. So I would hazard a guess that most businesses are generally starting, you know, they're kind of starting slow and building up customers that are paying customers, hopefully fairly early on. I mean, you actually were able to go the other way and do it where you can have the closed beta and bring in 9,000. You know, that's a huge, like 9,000 companies that are sort of ready to be your customers. You know, do you see that very often? And is that, you know?
I think you see it more now. I think that's what content. So you can start doing content marketing the day you start developing your product. I mean, so that was for us. We weren't in private beta as some like special tactical trick. It was our product just wasn't ready. So we kind of, you know, as a freelancer team learned as one of the early teams on it, it's like, man, this thing kind of sucks, you know. So.
No, I wouldn't say it sucks. It's actually a really awesome product.
That was a year ago.
Yeah.
But what I'm saying is that we weren't ready to put a whole bunch of companies on it until we could kind of get it to the point where we had the validation that it actually was working for people. So better to build a big waiting pool, let them in, iterate on feedback, see what's broken, keep fixing. And so we finally ended the private beta last June. So it's definitely, I think that's the more proven model today is you don't, like it was really funny with LogMeIn, we identified a problem, we went to develop the solution to that problem. By the time we came out with the solution, like in the old waterfall kind of model, somebody else had already solved the problem, grown, been acquired, and was spending $10 million a month marketing their solution against the problem that we were so excited about the solution that we built. So, I mean, we were able, with a couple of tweaks, to still build a competitive product in that space, but it's just a kind of a different world now where you have this more continuous release cycle where you're iterating on feedback and you know, some people charge it all the way along. We thought it was better to not charge for you know, a lot of that. And but what's cool is that, you know, being able to get feedback from freelancer, a company like Loot Crate, one of our early beta users. Now they're the fastest growing company in America on the Inc. 500. So we were able to kind of like in sync with them, build a solution to manage growth and actually have somebody who's like a good reference customer now on there.
Cool. Just one last question from me, and I think we can open it up to the audience. The other area that has, or that I've been interested in is, you know, the companies that have really grown so fast that it's actually caused kind of, you know, like culture problems and that sort of thing in terms of keeping everyone on the same page and keeping everyone doing the right thing. Have you ever experienced those, and what did you do to try to mitigate it?
Yeah, growth is hard. Like, you know, I mean, company growth is hard. And
yeah,
I think
we in 1 year, I think we doubled in staff, and that was, yeah.
I think, yeah, I don't know a great solution on that. You know, to be honest, when I left LogMeIn, I swore off ever working for a company again because I knew the outcome was going to be bad one way or the other. Either we weren't going to grow or we were going to grow. And either way, I wasn't going to like it. So, but then I finally decided to be a CEO because if it sucks, then that's on me. So.
Yeah, so that's fair enough. Cool. Well, I think we can open up to audience questions now.
Hi, I'm Chris Meredith. We were all in a bit of shock at the moment after the results of the American election. Are there any?
We going there?
Are there any opportunities for us coming out of that?
I talked to somebody today who's built a really good immigration solution. So I think that might be one. It's just managing all the outflux of Americans. No, I mean, I don't know. I think I think one great solution would be a Facebook alternative or maybe Facebook filter that doesn't mention politics. Because and so how have I used it in my company? We actually ran an ad that said, tired of talking about politics, talk about growth on GrowthHackers, and we ran that. It didn't work very well, but at least that's part of the testing. Because people still wanted to talk about politics.
Hi, what's the ideal marketing technology stack for a startup?
So ideal marketing technology stack for startup, it probably kind of depends B2B versus B2C. But I mean, the three things that I really look for are really good analytics. So when I was coming in and doing these 6-month interim roles with these various companies, probably the first third at least was taking my spec for a tracking system and having them build it from scratch. And today you can hook one of those up in like a day, something that's pretty good. So a really good tracking system. So user-based tracking, so like something like a Kissmetrics or a Mixpanel or an Amplitude. My favorite of the day lately is Amplitude because it's 20 million free events. So an early stage startup doesn't basically can save themselves thousands of dollars, tens of thousands a year potentially using a free version. And then like good A/B testing, on-page A/B testing. So a couple of different ways you can go with that. Like you can do an Optimizely or a visual website optimizer that makes it really easy to change text on a live page, or you can do like an unbounce where you actually can roll pages up yourself, new pages. Either way, and in both cases, you're essentially setting it up as an A/B test, so you can see what works. Stuff like that used to take. I had my first hire at LogMeIn was a design engineer, basically to build landing pages. And today, I'm a design engineer if I use it. Not a really good designer, but not much of an engineer either. And then the last would be email. Again, you want to be able to do a lot of A/B testing in email, and so there's a lot of different solutions for email testing. So those would be probably my three main ones.
Can I ask another one? Since you mentioned analytics.
Sure.
So heaps of, marketing managers, there's always this conversation on how much they should measure, what they should measure, and some people saying, you should only have 4 metrics. I heard Halim speak what he was measuring, and he said, we measure everything. Mm-hmm. So what's your comment on that?
Yeah, so I have kind of an interesting story with analytics. The first analytics solution I ever used was in probably 1996. I sat down with something called Web Trends and was fascinated. It was so cool. I could see everything. I could see the browsers people were using. I just poured through all these log files, and I loved it. Literally, 2-day data binge of just totally geeking out. And then I pulled my head out of it, and I said, I did nothing to grow this business in the last 2 days. All I did was look at a bunch of data, and I'm never going to look at data again for data's sake. And so for me, I then backed out and said, I only am going to look at stuff that validates a decision that I've made or proves it wrong, but it's all data around decisions to help me make better decisions. So helps me inform a decision I'm going to make going forward, but more testing-based data. I've kind of changed it a little bit since then, where I do think you want to monitor certain metrics. So there's some monitoring data. The main metric would be what a lot of people call the North Star metric now, where it's sort of something that's correlated to customer value, but you're looking at that metric on a pretty frequent basis to see how it's trending, and then any other like kind of key KPIs that relate to key KPIs is like key twice, but key performance indicators that just hopefully are at least kind of the sub metrics of your North Star metric, and maybe things like revenue or trials or some other things that are other kind of general funnel metrics around that, and then a lot of it then becomes just experiments, like being able to analyze did an experiment work or did it not work. I think there is kind of another angle with metrics where you can essentially look at study metrics for opportunities for leverage of where you can focus more testing and set objectives around trying to improve some metrics and have some sense of benchmarks of where you think the industry might be, or just common sense, like really weird that 95% of the people that sign up for our product never use it. That doesn't sound right. Maybe I can improve that. So there's different ways to look at the metrics, but I don't think I would say measure everything and look at everything, because like it could freeze you. But Willix kind of comes from a data analyst background, and I respect him a lot. So not surprised that he would really focus on that.
Yeah, just to add to that slightly, I mean, a big part of the reason that we do measure everything, and he's not kidding. The dashboard is enormous, but I mean, a big part of it is just there's a lot of small moving parts in Freelancer, and I think in most businesses, and a lot of times a small part of it will break, and it doesn't get we don't pick it up in our QA or whatever because it's such a minor thing, and we notice it on a graph at some point. I mean, that's a big part of why we have. That's a big part of why I have so many. There's a lot of them we don't look at very often, but when we do, we go, oh, this small thing's broken. So, yeah. And
you want to be able to diagnose when something's broken if you've got good tracking where you can just keep drilling into it to figure out what's the broken thing behind the broken metric, and that's something that the bigger you get, the more important that gets, because it could cost you hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars if something stays broken for too long.
Yeah, I mean, we have a few metrics where something might break that, it could be as important as a successful test now, because our tests are just eking out small gains. But yeah, if we don't have all these graphs, we just never know. So.
Yeah, Sean, I remember in the workshop you were saying that survey through emails for mobile apps don't have the best response rate. Mm-hmm. I know there's some pretty cool tech around that where you can kind of shape your feedback, doing in-app push notifications. What have you found? And I know this does vary per app, but in your experience, what have you found has been effective at gathering that early kind of beta feedback for mobile apps?
I mean, yeah, there is some surveys now that you can run in-app surveys, and that would be, I know the company we used to own, Qualaroo, has like mobile web surveys. They might have mobile app surveys now. I'm not sure, but there's others that have actually mobile app surveys, and being able to get that qualitative feedback around, what's going on. You can just you get so much insight from people if you have that qualitative feedback that it's I don't know how anyone can navigate without it personally.
Hi again.
Hey.
My question is about, so I've got early traction growth, and what I'm really struggling with is that I don't know where my traffic's coming from. Mm-hmm. So I'd love to be able to drill down on it, but because I don't know where it's coming from, I've tried UTM, and Bitly links and everything like that. So how
talk a little bit more into
Sorry,
it.
Hi.
I can hear you.
I'm just struggling to work out how can I drill in and test that piece of traffic if I don't know where it's coming from.
Mm-hmm. Have you asked that traffic where it's coming from?
No, because I don't know who it is. So like, for example, to a website, lots of traffic, but obviously it says direct, and then you go to Google, there's nothing. Mm-hmm. Nothing.
So that's where something like Qualaroo, the product we used to have, you could literally target it to just direct traffic and say, how did you find out about us? And you might not want to run that long term, but it could really fill in some gaps around.
Is that in the survey though? So you have to have already got there?
No, it's right on the web page itself. So it just like based on, and you can do it like as they're going to leave the page based on the mouse movement. So it's really behavioral, targeted based on source information. And again, the more insight that you can get around why people are coming there. I mean, it's interesting with LogMeIn, we hit a panic moment. So it sounds like you're in the earlier days, but we hit a panic moment where at one point we had complete control over every dollar we spent. We knew the return on investment on that, and it was great. And then one day, our CEO got really nervous with me and just said, I feel like we're losing control. I don't know where we would, and now I can look back and say, that was a great day. When organic was kicking in and all these things were happening, and it wasn't just a function of our actions, but growth had kind of taken on a life of its own, that's a really good thing. And that's where you have to basically triangulate on things. And so it's not just going to be UTM based, but you need to do UTM where you have it, surveys to help fill in the gaps, and then just like trend analysis. I try this, I turn it off, I turn it back on, what happened? Like you're doing all of these things to kind of try to get an idea of what's happening that's driving growth.
So then to use a really annoying jargon term, but the bullseye technique, so trying to work out what my 3 are, I don't know how to build that into the bullseye.
Yeah, I unfortunately don't know the bullseye too much. So.
Okay. It's like where you work out exactly what 3, so of the 25 different marketing channels that there are, what 3 are getting you the most traction, and how can you really, team of 1 as well. So
yeah, again, I would start with at least with something like Qualaroo if you've got mostly web traffic, and just ask them.
Awesome, thank you.
You're welcome. Got a question back there?
Missed him.
Just don't drop it.
So you talked about like building a growth culture. Have you thought about like in terms of engineering, like how to sort of build engineering which is sort of receptive to high tempo testing and stuff like that? Like any engineering specific trait you look for in an engineer?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So around what type of an engineer would be most attracted to a growth team, say?
Yep.
So basically an engineer who doesn't mind cranking things out fast and fast and dirty, where I know a lot of engineers that like to really go heads down on a project and really be able to kind of get immersed in it for weeks, and those engineers don't tend to do very well on kind of a high tempo testing growth process. Same thing with designers. There's some designers that really like to take things and it may not be weeks with them, but it might be days, where it's got to be people who can like throw things together pretty fast and actually really start to like that fast feedback loop, and get caught up in being able to say, wow, people reacted much more differently than I expected them to. And like there's some people that thrive on that, and there's some people that it's just not their thing. So that would be the biggest thing. It's just like somebody who doesn't mind chunking things out small and getting those feedback on it fast.
Cool. Do we have any more questions? Was that? Yeah.
Interesting. I guess coming back to the sort of SEO side of things, how much of SEO do you think nowadays, as far as, say you're in a team or a company where there isn't a full-time dedicated team solely on SEO, how much of it do you think nowadays is kind of like just making sure you've got the basics down pat and you're not sort of being silly with anything on page, right, and then doing a little bit of offsite? How much of it do you think is that versus actually really trying radical new changes, so changing sort of the way you're siloing data or something like that? Do you think it's mostly just checklist, okay, we're kind of good, focus on other things, or? Yeah,
so first I'll preface that I'm not really an SEO expert, but I definitely think you want to get the basics there, and then I think a lot of SEO is today about content marketing and about just figuring out the terms that you want to rank for, and then just figuring out how am I going to rank for those terms. I don't think it's necessarily huge test driven, but I could be wrong, but that's where I would turn to an SEO expert to help me out.
So for a lot of the strategies you talked about around testing, you'd need to be able to code to implement it. How would you kind of structure like an early growth team because most people who are like great at coding probably don't have that growth mindset. So how would you kind of like get that in one person, or if you can't, like how do you coordinate like 2 people to drive the growth team?
Yeah, so one, I wouldn't necessarily say that someone who's great at coding wouldn't have a good growth mindset. So I think, to me, that the best growth mindset is a problem solver. It's like, if you can identify the problem, how do we tap into Craigslist as a referral channel? How do we make it so that twice as many people who sign up for our product actually use our product? How do we get people to come back more than 2 times a month? Like, each of those are very specific problems, and engineers tend to be really good at, they tend to like the challenge of problems. And so if you can direct an engineer toward problem solving, that can be great. But it doesn't have to just be an engineer. It can be anybody who thrives on problem solving. And sometimes you're going to borrow an engineer. Not all companies are going to be big enough where they can have a dedicated growth engineer, and so it's a matter of basically defining the experiment you want to run, and then getting the access to the resource to build that experiment for you, and hopefully doing it in a way that you're not just turning it over to them, but what we like to do on my team is have at least a project manager who, we don't want to have anyone project manage an experiment who's not passionate about that experiment, who doesn't truly believe it's going to work, because otherwise they're just going to go through the motions and just put it out to see if it works. They're going to think about what's the most minimal thing they can do, and they don't think it's going to work anyway, so just make it even smaller, so they just get it out of the way. So that's where, if you have somebody who is passionate, that thinks it's going to work, they'll be able to really kind of define what is the experiment really need to be for them to be confident it's going to work, and then hopefully they'll have an engineer they can team up with to get it done.
Yep. Cool. Thanks.
Sure. Got someone behind you.
Thanks. Just going back to the A/B testing for coding and getting things out quick and dirty. How do you know when things are ready, even though they're not completed to launch?
So again, kind of as I was just saying with the previous question, that this is where you need to be somewhat flexible as the project manager of an experiment. Is you don't want to be so kind of dogmatic that the only way to do the experiment is exactly how I want to do it, but you have to be able to come back and say, all right, the way I want to do it is going to take 3 weeks to get done. And you put your head together with the engineer and you know what? I'm not sure that might even work better, and that's only going to take a day to get done. Yeah, let's so. But again, it needs to be. You need to be confident that it will work. You need to have that kind of conviction that it'll work, and it probably won't, because that's the reality. Is that most of the time it doesn't. But if you don't think it's going to work, then that's a self-fulfilling prophecy. You're going to probably prove yourself right.
Is it almost like trial on the run, kind of like?
Yeah, I mean that ultimately. Either way, it's a guess, and so you just want to make sure that it is a minimal test, that you're not turning it into some huge test, but it's not so minimal that it doesn't have a chance of working, and it's a little bit of gut.